This story sends us into a realm beyond time where stone remembers, stars whisper, and a single soul dares to seek what the gods themselves once feared to lose. In a desert older than memory, buried beneath the weight of forgotten prayers and celestial maps, lies a hidden temple untouched by centuries. There, a young priestess named Anufis awakens a destiny etched not in ink, but in flame, crystal, and silence. Her path winds through chambers where memory breathes, mirrors bleed light, and even time must answer to the soul that dares to look within. This is not a tale of magic, it is a descent into truth, a trial of self, a song sung only once in the voice of the stars. The variegated waves of sand dunes, painted by the heat of the noonday sky, rippled slowly under the caress of a dry wind. It was as if the desert itself were breathing, exhaling long, weary sighs of lost ages. Beneath the merciless sun, Anufis' feet barely touched the scorched sand, leaving behind faint indentations, subtle, fading traces of her passage. Her throat ached from the long journey and the lingering scent of incense from the morning rites. Every breath felt like a droplet of water evaporating into the vast sea of heat. She walked without haste, as if reading every grain of time slipping beneath her bare feet. Her tightly woven braids, arranged in an intricate pattern, held her hair in place, though stray strands, long unaccustomed to comfort, trembled in the stream of hot air. Her linen mantle, pale blue like the evening sky over the Nile, fluttered faintly, like the smoke of a dying torch, offering a whisper of coolness to her sun-darkened shoulders. With every step, she felt the press of the dagger, its obsidian blade hidden beneath the fabric, sharp enough to cut not only flesh, but the veil between worlds. The journey to the pyramid's northern gate began among dunes whose shapes shifted with each gust of wind, like living beings rearranging their limbs. Anufis' footsteps echoed softly and evenly, resonating like the muffled clang of palace forges, where blacksmiths hammered metal, artisans carved lepis and malachite, and merchants whispered deals. That world, the world of yesterday, still called to her. But with every step, she walked deeper into the temple's heart, where time would dissolve into eternity. Before climbing the final sandy ridge, she remembered her mother, patient and stern, teaching her the sacred intricacies of ritual. In the twilight of youth, Anufis had listened to tales of scrolls hidden beyond the pyramid's walls, of rites bestowing dominion over life and death. "The hour will come," whispered the eldest priestess, "when you feel the call of the sands. And then you will know the way back is closed." Now that premonition throbbed in every nerve of her body, burning with resolve. Suddenly something crunched beneath her heel, a fragment of ancient brick embedded in the sand. Anufis halted and crouched. Just below the jagged edge of a sun-baked shard, she saw a golden ring stamped with the Eye of Re. In that instant, she knew it wasn't merely an amulet, but a signpost, left by those who had walked this path before her. Touching the ring sent a tingling shiver through her skin, as if it offered the residue of ancient knowledge. She ran her palm across the engraved symbol and felt the sand stir, trembling faintly, as if the earth itself were parting for her step. With a breath of resolve, Anufis rose and moved toward the granite wall of the northern gate. The granite beneath her fingers was cool, almost damp, in defiance of the burning air. Carved reliefs of serpents and solar discs still held the faintest traces of pigment, once meant to ward off evil spirits. On the greenish ochre stone, faded lines flickered, whispering of a long-vanished grandeur. Drawing a deep breath, the priestess pressed her forehead to the stone and listened. From within the ancient rock came a low rumble, like the awakening of a sleeping giant. She stepped into the pyramid, and the contrast was immediate. Coolness enfolded her like a veil, and the air shimmered with metallic and resinous scents. Anufis emerged into a hall where the marble floor, polished to a mirror sheen, gleamed like lapis lazuli beneath a windless Nile sky. Along the walls loomed bas-reliefs of forgotten gods, their faces barely discernible in the half-tones of shadow, as if the ghosts of antiquity still watched her every move. From the cracks in the dome, shafts of light fell to the floor in soft ribbons, dissolving into glowing islands across the stone. At the center stood a low pedestal, and upon it rested a golden chalice, honored in place, adorned with intricate filigree of lapis and malachite. The metallic surface rippled with faint reflections, casting shifting glimmers along the walls, light and shadow weaving a quiet dance. Anufis circled the pedestal with reverence. This chalice had once cradled blood and tears, through which ancient priests summoned divine forces. When her fingers brushed the rim, a subtle vibration answered, a low hum, echoing the distant rhythm of a heartbeat. The artifact had sensed her touch and responded to the presence of the living. Her gaze drifted to the eastern wall. There, a faint glow shimmered along the stone, a narrow passage opened, veined with streaks of what the ancients called weeping stone, translucent crystals that wept moisture from the deep. Each drop traced a golden line along the granite, a tear shed by time itself. She stepped into the corridor. A chill ran down her spine, from heels to nape, arching her back with its delicate touch. The lantern in her hand flickered in the droplets, turning them into stars frozen in stone. The melody of her steps echoed tightly around her, like the pulse of an ancient drum, its rhythm calling from forgotten rites. She recalled the parting words of her mentor. If you walk this path to its end, you will find light. But to know the void is to risk dissolving in it. The words walked beside her now, a shadow for every step. At last the passage opened into a vast chamber. In its center rested a black sarcophagus, a monolith of dark granite, heavy with centuries of secrets. Spiraling carvings twisted along the lid like coiled serpents, luring the hand even as they warned it away. From fine cracks between the stone, a steady blue light leaked, casting an unearthly glow. As Anufis approached, her reflection wavered on the polished surface, ghost-like, as though she were peering into murky water. At the base lay a golden mask, its form echoing the drape of her mantle, yet lifeless. In her hand, the ring bearing the eye of Ra shimmered softly with an inner light. She touched the carvings with the ring. The stone serpents trembled. A deep vibration passed through the granite, then a sound, like 1,000 voices speaking as one, a chorus of prayers and curses whispered by the long dead. In her mind, a name rang out, her name, not spoken, but thunderous. A summons from something old. Divine. The hum grew louder. New glyphs blazed to life across the walls, runes once invisible, now glowing in response. Then, in that breathless moment, the seam between lid and base yawned open. A hidden door of vapor-thin precision parted, revealing a darkness within. And at its heart, a shimmer. An invitation. The hidden door creaked open like an ancient vault, and warm air spilled into the chamber, carrying with it the pollen of the black lotus. It clung to her hair, her mantle dusting her in silver specks. The whisper of the sands rose again, louder now, blending with the rhythm of her pulse. Anufis stepped forward. The world behind her trembled, collapsing into dust and silence. Before her yawned a void without walls, without floor, only a calling, a pull on her soul. Her heart raced. Her mind teetered between awe and terror. She remembered everything she had been taught, every action in this place a threshold between immortality and oblivion. But the step had been taken. She entered the dark, and the world behind her dissolved into the whisper of sand. Here, time no longer moved. Only the voice of eternity remained, speaking truths it would never promise to let her return from. The torch's dim flame flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the corridor walls, ghosts of long-departed priests, condemned to wander the stone veins of the earth forever. Anufis paused at the edge of the narrow passage, where granite, aged by thousands of years, closed in until the walls nearly touched. A damp chill pierced her mantle and skin alike, the breath of a forgotten god, unrelenting and indifferent. Each movement she made echoed through the ancient space, like the distant murmur of hidden chambers, where time surrendered to eternity. This corridor, carved along the pyramid's eastern wall, had been hewn by craftsmen who understood not only stone, but the mysteries embedded in completed rites. The dark gray granite, streaked with pale inclusions, resembled the hardened tears of Horus's serpent. Rare moisture clung to the winding cracks, forming silver droplets on the cold floor. Every footstep rang with a dull chime, as though the pyramid itself were responding to the presence of its guest. Memories of the scorching sun above the dunes pulsed between her heartbeats. Her mother's voice rose in her mind. Granite is the breath of the earth, the keeper of destinies. Show weakness, and it will consume you." The words, like a dagger, stayed lodged in her thoughts, sharpening her focus. For the first time on her journey, a few strands of hair had escaped her braid, whipping across her face in the stagnant air. She brushed them back and moved on. After several dozen paces, she spotted two perfectly aligned stone slabs beneath her feet, a warning of hidden traps. Fragments of ancient text surfaced in her memory. "Mind your step, for the ground may become your executioner." She knelt, touched the surface. The smoothness was deceptive. Beneath the stone lay toothed pins, ready to release death in an instant. Gently, she shifted the slab with the edge of her dagger. A soft hiss escaped as the mechanism disarmed. She tested the path again, confirmed it safe, and pressed forward. The air thickened with each step, stale, dusty, heavy. Here and there the walls bore faded remnants of pigment, pale blue smears that once formed celestial falcons. Her eyes caught faint outlines of sacred symbols, but most had been deliberately erased, as if someone had tried to hide the true way. At times she thought she heard a deep thudding, like the footsteps of a massive beast, but when she strained to listen, only the faint dripping of water remained. Suddenly the corridor opened into a vast hall supported by rows of granite columns. The ceiling soared to incomprehensible heights, vanishing into blackness. Between the columns lay a mosaic of shattered glass and ceramic, colorful fragments forming the Eye of Ra, ringed with tongues of fire. The reflection from Anopa's lantern danced across the shards, and the chamber came alive with tiny lights, as if 1,000 fireflies had frozen in the midst of an eternal waltz. A heaviness hung in the air. At the rear of the hall stood a high altar strewn with scraps of cloth and animal skulls from species long extinct. Dark red stains marked the stone, testament to a rite performed millennia ago, blood mixed with ash from sacred herbs to lull the spirits of the guardians. Anufis stepped closer, catching faint traces of scorched leaves and a sour whiff of sulfur. She lowered her palm to the altar, running her fingers through the brittle mix. In some places the granite had worn thin from repeated offerings, as though the ritual had been carried out again and again. A tremor stirred behind her, the rattle of long, stilled mechanisms. She turned and spotted a thin crack in the floor, where pale steam began to rise. Water, seeping from deep within the pyramid, pooled beneath the chamber, forming treacherous slicks against the jagged stone. Anufis skirted the edge of the hall, treading the driest path she could find. Along the way she noticed a carved half-cross in the granite, a symbol of passage between worlds, pointing toward a descending staircase. The stairs dropped down 8 granite steps, the arch above etched with dense arabesques. Every curve was carved so finely that in torchlight they shimmered like lace. As she descended, the air changed, the scent of damp earth mingled with stagnant water, sweetened by a bitter trace of ambrosia and a breath of mint. Remnants of incense once poured in priestly rites lingered here, like the shadow of a forgotten hymn. The lower chamber welcomed her with frescoes that covered walls and ceiling, scenes of celestial upheaval, serpents with wings, faces of gods peering from clouds, and human shadows ascending radiant gates. In places, the pigment still pulsed with deep, vibrant hues, echoes of a lifelong past. The air seemed to vibrate, perhaps stirred by the vast crystal hanging from chains above. The crystal was immense, translucent with a blue sheen, emitting a faint inner glow. Around it, faint traces of wires and golden veins linked it to the surrounding stone. Its light rippled across the walls, casting shadows like flying blades. Anufis stepped toward the crystal's base, where a painted bowl rested, meant to collect drops of water. A sign that here, nature and magic intertwined. The bowl was full, the liquid trembling softly at its surface. She leaned closer and tasted a drop. The mineral tang and subtle salt hinted at something ancient flowing through the stone itself. These sacred waters were once mixed with burnt herbs to cleanse the body and spirit for those who dared go further. As Anufis returned the bowl to its place, a sharp cracking echoed behind her. She spun around, granite walls were moving, slowly converging. The entire room was a trap, designed to test the endurance of the unworthy. Her heart clenched, but she moved swiftly, shielding herself along the wall. A small niche protruded nearby, with a thick bronze lever. She lunged for it, gripped it tight, and pulled. At once the grinding reversed, the walls shuddered, then retreated. She climbed to a ledge and found herself at the entrance to a narrow passage that led deeper into the earth, into a silence broken only by the pounding of her own heart. At her feet lay charred torch fragments, long extinguished. Others had come here. None had gone further. Anufis inhaled. Her chest tightened, not from fear alone, but awe. She stepped onto the ledge. The torchlight died, vanishing into perfect darkness. Only a faint vibration pulsed through the stone beneath her feet. Her hands felt along the wall, fingers finding footholds. The descent took minutes, or perhaps centuries, as time itself unraveled. At the bottom, a small chamber unfolded beneath a low arch. The walls were etched with runes, worn yet legible, prophecies from an age when gods still walked the earth. One stood out. Through stone you shall find light, but not all can face the abyss and remain. A coldness touched her bones. For a moment she hesitated. But she remembered her family's vow, her sacred promise to preserve the balance between worlds. And so she moved forward. The path ended at a massive tile engraved with coiled serpents and solar discs. In the center, the faint gleam of her torch was mirrored in a ring of shadows. She drew her dagger and traced the symbols, knowing that a single false stroke could seal her fate. But the pattern responded, settling into her palm. With a soft groan, the slab descended, revealing a circular niche lined with protruding steps. Anufis climbed down into a chamber where the floor was a vast engraved map, depicting the subterranean rivers that fed the pyramid's lifeblood. Hollow stone pipes rose from the floor, radiating cold, some even wept moisture from the pores of the rock. She realized that the next trial would lead through a twisted tunnel, where darkness and water joined as one. A threshold for those who dared walk the knife's edge between life and what lay beyond. Drawing strength from within, Anupis stepped into the narrow corridor. The sound of water, drop upon drop, followed her like a sacred drumbeat. As Anupis crossed the threshold into the new chamber, she was immediately enveloped in a soft, mystic rhythm, the tranquil sound of water droplets falling in even cadence. Dim light bathed the space in a silvery glow, emanating from crystals embedded in the walls, weeping stones, guardians of the pyramid's hidden moisture, releasing it in thin, translucent drops. Each drop struck the granite with a gentle chime, transforming the chamber into a mute bell playing an ancient melody. The floor was paved with black basalt tiles, laced with veins of obsidian glimmering in the low light. These were known as the veins of the pyramid, through which, according to sacred texts, flowed an energy that bound the soul of the priestess to the heart of Khufu himself. With careful precision, Anufis began her path, each step calculated. A single misstep could trigger a trap or lead her into a wall that offered no return. The walls were adorned with silver arteries, glowing mineral threads that ran like the roots of a vast, subterranean tree. Delicate filaments hung from them like plant tendrils, and when drops of water fell, they sang like echoes of the living origins of this place. The chamber was low, the ceiling just above her outstretched hand, carved to flawless smoothness. When Anufis touched the granite, she felt a chill that quickly gave way to warmth, as if the stone was breathing. Her torchlight thinned, yielding to the soft glow of the weeping crystals. To the left stood a group of statues, priestesses carved from the same dusky gray granite. Their faces were hidden by hoods, their hands crossed over their chests in silence, guardians of ancient knowledge. Above one statue hung a belt formed of connected drops of weeping stone, a ritual talisman of protection. Anufis ran a finger across the crystals, and a faint tone answered her touch, as if the stone had recognized her. Opposite, a notched lever protruded from the wall, etched with microscopic runes. She pulled it gently, and with a hushed rumble, a granite partition slid aside, revealing a wide corridor. From its depths drifted the damp scent of old slate and the sharp tang of mineral vapor. The corridor spiraled downward like the shell of an exotic snail. Steps carved directly into the granite slope showed the wear of centuries of priestly passage. Small basins sat on each landing, catching the tears of stone. They were half full, reflecting her lantern's faint light. Enophis bent over one, drawing a small portion into a pouch of fine leather for use in a coming ritual. At the bottom of the stairs, a semicircular chamber opened before her. Faded frescoes adorned the walls, strokes of ochre and azure forming scenes of devotion to the goddess Nut, priestesses walking along the Nile's banks, bearing offerings of water's tears. Her gaze lingered on the image of a young priestess, one hand raised toward the sky. Though the lines were blurred by time, Enophis could still feel the victorious tremble in her gesture. In the chamber's center rose a black granite altar, 4 concentric circles, each carved from a single stone, forming a tiered pyramid. Nestled within each ring were fragments of weeping stone, varied in shape and size. Enophis stepped closer to study them. The pattern on the first ring resembled a spiderweb, the second bore waves, the third held a sun disk, and at the top, the Eye of Ra. Her heart quickened. Legend held that the altar was a mirror of the priestess's fate. Those bold enough to craft their own rite had to place the fragments in the correct order. A mistake would strand them in the labyrinth of their own soul. She inhaled deeply and retrieved the pouch of sacred water she had gathered. Placing it on the altar's edge, she carefully set the spiderweb fragment in the first ring. The crystals on the walls shimmered in response, and the droplets began to fall faster. From a fold in her robe, she withdrew a scroll found in the chamber before. Unfurled, it revealed a map, 7 symbols, each corresponding to one of the altar's rings. The second was an oval, shaped like water's rippling surface. She placed the matching fragment and whispered, "Waters of minutes and moments, hear my call." A strand of silence trembled, and behind her, a whisper stirred the air. The third piece was the disc. She gently laid the polished shard upon the next ring. At once, pearls of light gathered above the altar, forming a soft dome. Rays filtered through the stone ceiling, illuminating her head in a sacred glow. Finally, she placed the Eye of Ra at the top. A pale blue-white light flared from the altar's center. It vibrated, and the entire floor rippled like water stirred by waking stone. A footstep sounded behind her. She turned. From the chamber's shadows emerged a spectral guardian, shaped like a youthful priest, his figure translucent and adorned with golden inlays. In his hands he held an amulet like her own. His gaze held no menace. He waited, as if seeking her confirmation. Enophis bowed, her hands hovering above the altar. She took the amulet from him and joined it with the Eye of Ra on her ring. Light traced a smooth line between the two, linking them. The hall filled with a chime, as if distant voices were singing. The guardian nodded once and faded into incense-scented air. The altar shivered again. A panel before it rose, revealing stairs that led deeper. Enophis descended slowly into a narrow, low corridor. Its walls were sheathed in the thinnest veil of water. Every droplet glowed faintly blue, and as they slid down the surface, it seemed the passage was alive, breathing with a rhythm of its own. Then a dull thud. A mechanism stirred in the dark. The crystals on the walls flickered, and the water froze into a glassy membrane. Enophis understood. This was a test. She had to reach the end of the corridor before the water dried, or be trapped by the tears of memory. To fail was to drown in recollection. She began her movement, step by careful step across the translucent quartz ridges. Each shift stirred a crackle, like frost breaking beneath her feet. Midway through, whispers reached her, voices of those who had come before and never returned. Knees pricked her skin, but she steeled herself and pressed on. At last she reached the end. The water resumed its flow. Threads of glowing blue reconnected like a bridge behind her. Before her now lay a chamber adorned with mosaics, mirrored tiles and golden filaments weaving images. It was the portal of memory, a place where echoes of all who had reached this point were stored. In those mirrored figures, she saw her mother and her mentor, smiling. Her heart faltered. She stepped closer, reaching toward the mosaic. The tiles trembled, reflecting her face. Countless eyes looked back, ancient priests, young novices, lives devoted to the temple. Their gaze held no demand, only a quiet strength. In the center of the room stood the final altar, a round slab of pale limestone, encircled by golden rings. Atop it rested a ring of black obsidian, set with a silver eye. This was the vow ring, marking the end of the ritual path. Placing it on her finger, Enophis heard a deep resonance, like the cracking of a star's shell. The air shuddered. From the center of the room rose 3 narrow beams of light, crossing to form a capsule around her. Within, she felt the memory crystals begin to thread into her soul, the wisdom of ancient rites, the edge between life and death, the harmony of water and stone. Then the light dissolved. Before her stood heavy oak doors, inlaid with bronze shaped like falling tears. They led into the true labyrinth, the interchamber passages where the pyramid's memory would embrace her fully. Enophis gazed at the doors and felt a surge of resolve. There was no going back now. The tears of memory had become part of her story. From the cold maze of interchamber corridors, Enophis emerged into the Hall of Mirrors, a vast room, long enough to contain a ritual procession, wide enough to hold a prayer. Rows of shallow basins were carved precisely into the pale limestone floor, each rimmed with delicate engravings, the outlines of Bennu birds, priestly hands in reverence, and interwoven symbols of the Ankh. The water within the bowls lay perfectly still, steel-like and silent, mirroring the arched ceiling above, adorned with carved stars and the warm flicker of torches. A double world held breathless in quiet stillness. The walls were clad in polished marble, laced with slender veins of black quartz, like a network of vessels through stone. The air here was thick and damp, carrying the faint scent of moss, aged clay, and the linen perfume of Enophis' robe. Each breath reminded her, this temple lived, inhaling her fears and hopes, keeping them sealed in stone. The first mirror held scattered shells at its base, bleached imprints of the ancient Nile, and shards of obsidian black as a night without stars. Lapis and malachite glimmers played across the water like constellations. When Enophis dipped her fingers, a wave of cold met her skin, ripples fanned outward. In the reflection appeared Hepset, an elder priestess robed in white linen, her eyes heavy with ancient sorrow. The water unfurled her life in fluid motion, the sacred offering to the well, whispered prayers by candlelight, the final step toward the marble hatch of oblivion. Enophis removed a small vial from her sash, inside, fragrant resin crystals. She dropped a few grains into the basin. Instantly the water shimmered with light, and the sound of tiny bells rang through the hall, echoing in every droplet. Hepset's image dissolved, leaving behind a trace of lapis blue, a gentle invitation to continue. The second basin, the mirror of doubt, gleamed with soft purple. Amethyst crystals, added by priests, lent it a deep, contemplative hue. A bronze ring circled the bowl, inscribed with a solemn warning, "Do not unbalance the scales." Enophis peered in and saw her own face, pale, tense, and behind her rose 3 shadows, her mother in a simple village gown, her mentor in a severe mantle, and her younger sister, clutching a half-opened amulet. The priestess's heart contracted, doubts invaded her mind like spectral smoke. She drew a deep breath, clenched her jaw, and pulled a sliver of obsidian wrapped in silver thread from her sash. She touched it to the surface. A soft light flared, and the ripples scattered the shadows. At the bottom of the bowl rose a single feather of Mayat, pure white, weightless, a symbol of harmony. She lifted it gently, and a warm pulse spread through her hand. The third mirror, the mirror of memory, glowed with a muted sapphire hue. An opaline vessel rested at its bottom. When Enophis looked in, the water stirred, childhood memories surfaced, her first steps up the temple stairs, the scent of sacred incense, and the quiet voice of her father reading lost scriptures in a whisper. A wave of nostalgia pressed against her chest. She collected a single opaline droplet in a flask, luminous, like living light. The fourth mirror breathed with fear. A steel rim channeled thin drafts that whispered like the breath of imprisoned spirits. In its depths, Enophis saw herself surrounded by dancing shadows, beetles, serpents, and otherworldly shapes rising from the water's gloom. Terror pierced her, but she stepped closer and placed her hand on the surface, tender as a mother comforting a child. The figures faded, replaced by a soft golden light that warmed her chest. The fifth and final, The mirror of choice was the largest. At its base lay golden ingots, symbols of power and rank. But in the reflection she stood on the edge of an abyss, a waterfall of eternity rushing into the void. Immortality whispered from beyond, a torn fragment of truth, leave all and follow the light. Anufis closed her eyes. She recalled the chill of the granite, the heat of the weeping path, the ink etched into her spirit. When she opened her eyes, she smiled at her reflection and touched the water. A veil of foam rose, outlining a door made of liquid mist. She passed through the watery veil into a dim corridor of dry granite. Torches flickered, their flames trembling and casting surreal shadows of Bennu birds across the carved arch. Thin rivulets of water trickled down the walls, blurring inscriptions. The pyramid seemed to whisper. Beyond this, only you and truth. Between the mirrors, she spotted 3 recessed lunettes, miniature memory chambers, each holding a crystal of moonstone. The first guardian, Pikam Kehat, echoed with the clang of forges, the hammering of bronze, the scent of molten metal. The second, Sekhemet, glowed with the fire of purification, resin smoke, hot oils, censers. The third, Omobu, offered her a whispered verse. Seek the gate in the heart of shadow. Touching each crystal sparked a memory whisper, and runes lit the walls, opening the next path. Heavy oak doors loomed ahead, bound in bronze shaped like coiling cobras. Their spiral engravings writhed like living serpents. At the center slot, a black obsidian key, inlaid with amethysts, waited. Anufis turned it. The doors creaked open, revealing a corridor paved in golden hieroglyphs, shimmering under torchlight. But the trials weren't over. Lining the corridor were slender niches, each holding a vessel of moonfire. These lamps of the past required offerings. From her sash, Anufis retrieved a ceramic lamp and poured a drop of opaline water into the first vessel. The flame leaped up, casting a long shadow toward a hidden panel. She repeated the rite at each vessel. Each time the flame shifted hue, from blue-white to golden crimson, until the entire corridor gleamed. Silver patterns awoke, slid apart, and revealed a hidden chamber. At its center stood a pedestal with a bowl for the weeping infusion. Anufis poured in the last of the sacred liquid and spoke the vow. May my light remain pure, and my spirit weightless. The room quivered with dancing symbols and shadows, revealing a door to the stone forest. Beyond it stretched a grove of stone trees, trunks of black basalt, leaves of malachite, and glistening weeping stone on the branches. The limbs swayed gently, and from within came the soft chime of obsidian bells. Every step she took resonated, a quiet hum, as if the earth acknowledged her presence. Runes were carved into the roots, bearing names of those who had once heard the call of reflections. She traced one with her finger. A soft voice answered, "Follow the light. Find your truest self." The branches parted. Before her stood a portal of transparent quartz, its sparkling facets refracted light, revealing paths into the heart of the earth. Anufis, watching her reflection shift and change within the crystal, took her final step into the unknown. The call of reflections had been answered. Now came the meeting with the truest mirror, the mirror of her soul, and the heart of Khufu itself. As Anufis took her final step down the corridor, the pale limestone beneath her feet gave way to golden sandstone, its surface sculpted as if from condensed sunlight. Before her, the amphitheater of life's grains opened like the beating heart of the pyramid, glittering with 1,000 reflections. The soft sandstone walls rose in smooth, concentric tiers shaped like a vast seashell. Each niche in the wall, tall as a priestess, held a slender glass vial filled with sand in hues of gold, each grain shimmering like a promise of immortality. A rare layer of dust crackled beneath her steps, fine particles scattered by unseen winds of the deep. With every movement, motes of gold drifted upward, hovering around her like glowing moths of light. Anufis paused and listened. In the silence, she could hear it, the whisper of 1,000,000,000 grains falling from the dome above, the hatch of time. The dome overhead resembled the shell of a colossal mollusk, polished to a mirror's gleam. At its center was a narrow slit, like a divine tear, through which sand descended in thin streams. Each grain made a sound as it fell, soft as silk brushing stone, delicate as breath. Every time one landed in the basin below, the air trembled with a chime almost too faint to hear. Anufis moved along the first row of niches. These were not vials of water, they held sand, sealed tight like miniature tombs. The first vial contained warm amber grains. As she touched the glass, the stone beneath her feet grew cool. Inside, faint lights stirred, movements as subtle as a heartbeat. 3 visions flickered, the Nile at dawn touched by its first rays, a shadowed tunnel bathed in torchlight, and the face of an old mentor vanishing into mist. No words came, only a tremble through her limbs. She stepped to the next vial. Its sand gleamed cold silver. A copper rim surrounded the glass, engraved with runes that warned of memory migraines. The grains caught and reflected the vault above, scattering silver gleams along the walls. It felt as if the moon itself had hidden here, in the cradle of remembrance. The third vial held rose-beige grains, soft as the light of a newborn sunrise. As Anufis leaned close, her breath mingled with the scent of temple incense, ancient, sweet. The aroma seemed to pass through the glass. She was overcome by a vision, sunrise over temple columns, the rustle of leaves near the river, birds crying to welcome the day. The sand shimmered, forming a delicate ring, and the vial's edges glowed faintly. Having completed the first circle, Anufis ascended a tier of the amphitheater. The dust thickened, each step echoed like a heartbeat in stone. She sat on a granite bench and looked around. Mosaic fragments on the walls formed a tableau, the gates of life, a winding path connecting the realm of the living with that of memory. Inlays of turquoise shimmered like water merging with sand. From the amphitheater center came a gentle sound, like a bell touching crystal. Anufis rose and approached a pedestal. It was carved from pale rose granite, waist high and shaped like a wide bowl. The basin was deep, up to the forearm, and filled with a heap of golden sand, as if freshly harvested. The grains glowed with inner fire, glinting amber, copper, and ochre. Above the sand drifted a fine silver mist, like a veil of breath hovering just above water. It barely touched the surface, like a coverlet of cloud hiding ancient images beneath. Anufis laid her hand on the rim. The granite's chill met her skin, and the grains at the edge trembled, sensing her touch. She leaned in, studying the 5 carved sigils encircling the basin: illumination, youth, maturity, aging, and dusk. The symbols, painted with red sandstone, glowed ruby under the flickering torchlight. The flames revealed a complex pattern, arrows engraved between the points, forming a closed circuit of epochs. Anufis felt the design sink into her awareness, soothing and awakening her in equal measure. A golden vortex began to rise from the amphitheater tiers, grains of sand spilling from the time hatch gathered into a whirling dance around the basin. The spiral accelerated, forming a glowing mist above the pedestal. The falling sand intensified, and a low hum bloomed in the air, like the voice of 1,000 unseen spirits. Nearby, in a wall niche, lay an obsidian vessel, its black glass smooth and cold, its surface traced with glazes of lapis. Inside were ritual tools, a tiny scalpel of lapis lazuli, and a vial of pigment, blood mixed with holy water. With steady hands, Anufis lifted the vial. She'd learned through trial how vital precision was. With the scalpel, she made a careful incision at the inside of her elbow. Blood trickled into the vessel, mingling with the obsidian's darkness. Her heart surged with energy, the sacred union of blood and universal memory. At that moment, the bowl of life's heart pulsed more intensely. The pedestal vibrated like a living being. The sand inside shivered, and from the obsidian vessel burst a beam of soft light. It met the golden whirlwind and fused into a radiant column. The bowl gave its sign. The vortex slowed. The sound quieted. Anufis stepped forward and reached into the sand, lifting the seed of truth, a tiny crystal gleaming hot in her palm. It held within it the fragrances, sounds, and essence of this entire realm. A whisper circled the amphitheater. The grains within the niches quivered, the vials began to shimmer, and the air filled with a hush like a fine, crystalline rain. Yet there was no breeze, it was the sand itself, whispering ancient knowledge. Enophis pressed the seed of truth to her chest. Above the bowl, golden dust rose and shaped three figures: memory, hope, and sacrifice, delicate forms made of glowing mist. They had no features, only suggestions, archetypes. Behind her, the lights in the niches dimmed. The vials faded. Gold echoes vanished like dreams. The amphitheater sank into twilight. The rite was complete. The bowl of life's heart slowly receded into its niche, revealing a wide passageway. Along its walls were the etched faces of those whose names had been sealed into the mingling of sand and sacred blood. Each face, faintly lit, held a moment from countless lifetimes. A side corridor revealed the vessel of rebirth, a noble alabaster urn. Enophis placed the seed of truth within it. The urn breathed deeply. A wave moved inside it, a quiet echo from the great world beyond. She drew in a long breath, then crossed the threshold. Beneath her feet, golden hieroglyphs shimmered to life. The corridor sloped downward, pulling her toward the pyramid's core, into the spiral of eternity. Enophis remained within the space where life's grains and her own blood had fused. In her heart, a new vow was inscribed. I am the keeper of memory, bearer of light from the chaos of time. And with each step deeper into the pyramid, she reaffirmed that vow. When Enophis stepped into the granite corridor, the stone's damp breath clung to her lungs, air like that of an underground cavern, thick with the treasures of time. The walls were clothed in bas reliefs of serpents, carved from black granite with inhuman precision. Their scales spiraled into mesmerizing patterns, their heads adorned with obsidian eyes that seemed to follow her every movement. The torches embedded in the stone burned with dim orange flames, casting long, trembling shadows. Beneath her feet, the granite floor had been polished to a mirror sheen, each step echoed softly, like breath in a sacred tomb. Threads of black basalt ran like veins along the floor, marking the safe path. But stray beyond them, and she risked awakening ancient traps. Now and then she heard the faint grind of hidden mechanisms, gears groaning beneath the stone, remembering. Overhead, the vaulted ceiling bore fine carvings of flight, birds etched mid-motion, and serpent rings coiling into endless spirals. As her torch shifted, light played across the reliefs, making them seem to breathe. The entire corridor pulsed as if alive. She brushed her hand against a serpent's figure. Her fingers found the fine dust of ancient incense, settled deep within the grooves, sweet, heady, and sharp, a blend of myrrh, frankincense, and wormwood. The aroma clouded her mind, conjuring memories of priestesses long ago who filled these chambers with sacred smoke. Suddenly, a statue stirred from the shadows. The head of a granite serpent, etched with predatory grace, turned. Its obsidian eyes flickered. A hidden panel shifted open. Enophis approached, peering into the recess, a sliver of space, hiding a lever. With the tip of her blade, she eased it open. A rumble passed through the stone, and a massive section of wall parted silently, revealing a narrow passage descending into deeper dark. She descended carefully, stepping along the uneven ledges. The humidity thickened, and drops of water fell rhythmically onto the stone, marking the silence with time's slow beat. Below, a low hum rose, perhaps the memory of others who had walked this path. She reached the marble circle of life, a labyrinth of black and white marble tiles, interwoven in concentric patterns. Each slit and crevice hid a trap, poisonous gas, barbed darts, or slashing blades. From her sash, she drew a small ritual bell, cracked and ancient, and suspended it gently over the first segment. Its chime rang clear. The slit exhaled mist and fell still. The second ring, lower in tone, caused the crystal to tremble. A wisp of acidic smoke rose, but the bell's sacred vibration contained it in a silent shield. With each ring, her mind sharpened. She moved with growing focus, mapping 4 safe paths before surrendering the 5th step to instinct. The bell quivered, the marble opened, and the darts lay in wait, just beyond where she had chosen not to tread. Then came the hall of mirrors. Granite walls polished to a marble glow reflected her silhouette into infinity. Torchlight turned the glassy surfaces into gates of abyss. She placed her palm upon one and felt it vibrate, the heartbeat of the pyramid. Each step multiplied her image. Sweat, breath, fabric mirrored endlessly. The way forward was marked only by the carved head of a serpent. When she touched it, the wall quivered and opened, revealing a chamber paved in serpentine mosaics. The floor glowed with eyes, mosaics of black basalt, turquoise, and gold forming coiled snakes with glittering gazes. Paths of lapis lazuli stretched between them. Each scale shimmered under the dust of her steps. The cool stone drank the warmth from her feet. A breeze stirred from behind. The scent of pine and resin surrounded her, like a forest ritual beneath stars. In the wind's murmur, she heard ancient hymns, songs of spring's return. At the far end loomed a serpent's mouth, carved from granite. Its jaws parted in readiness, their surface gleaming like black mirrors. Sacred runes arched above it, circles and lines, marking the path through chaos. In a niche, a crystal of obsidian pulsed with lapis light. "I enter your temple, Great Mother," Anuphis whispered, placing a ring of lapis onto the crystal. Light flared. The mouth groaned open. She stepped forward, knees trembling. The granite scorched her soles. Beyond, the hall of reflections awaited, rows of granite stellae edged with lapis lazuli, each one a portal, each one a mirror. The polished floor mirrored her every move. Under each footstep bloomed a new reflection, endless, flickering. She walked slowly, watching not only herself, but the shadows of those who had failed the trial of serpents. One figure emerged, a hooded priestess, her face unreadable. As Anuphis approached, it vanished like incense smoke. "My truth lies ahead," she murmured. The reflections parted, revealing a small passage in the far corner. Lapis runes along its surface glowed faintly, guiding her deeper to the pyramid's core. Her footsteps faded into silence. The corridor now bore no serpents, no mirrors, only sandstone spirals and stretching shadows. The journey grew more personal. Anuphis understood the stone serpents had changed her, but the true trial still lay ahead. Standing at the edge of the next path, she let her gaze pass over the last mirrored surface. Her reflection shimmered in the lapis, her shadow trembling. She realized each reflection was now a part of her story. The stone beneath her radiated a soft warmth, as if granite braided with lapis carried not only death, but flashes of life. A soft rustle stirred to her right. A sound like fingers brushing granite. She lifted her torch. A shape shifted behind the stone, a priestess smiling in recognition. As Anuphis raised her hand, the figure vanished, leaving behind only a shimmer of lapis light. Silence filled the space. Only her heartbeat remained. In that moment she felt her chest tighten. What lay ahead was no ordinary chamber, but the grove of eternal light, where weeping stone crystals were hidden among ancient pillars. The memory of silver tears returned, running water, hushed guardian voices, the soft gleam of quicksilver. She raised her lantern. Its beam revealed a narrow doorway, an arch engraved with vines and palms, a signpost to what lay beyond. The granite had given way to sandstone again, veined with honey-colored paths, like morning light breaking through the world's dawn. She stepped through the arch. The warmth surrounded her. The floor was laid with gleaming limestone tiles, inlaid with Bennu birds bearing incense. On either side, dense thickets of lapis fragments marked paths toward the groves of weeping crystals. The scent of incense and damp basalt filled her lungs. She remembered her mother's words. Follow the light, but never forget the dark is not an enemy. It is the keeper of secrets. She whispered the mantra, approaching the first granite pillar adorned with golden hieroglyphs. The glyphs glowed gently. She traced a line. She who endures the serpent shall find the path of tears. A blade of memory and wisdom flared in her chest. A rustle stirred deeper in the corridor, not her own footsteps, but like pebbles tumbling under wind. She listened. These were echoes of those who had walked here and never returned. She gathered that thought like a seed and moved forward, unwavering. She saw a small vessel embedded in the wall, a vessel of renewal, shaped from washed limestone and dotted with lapis. Its lid bore an 8-pointed star, the symbol of the infinite cycle. She placed her damp palm inside, wet from the grove's cool hollows. Water met lapis. A quiet chord rang out, like wind across harp strings. The vessel glowed, and a hidden niche opened. Inside, the walls were inlaid with hundreds of tiny weeping crystals, catching the last traces of light. She removed her inner lantern and hung it within. Its beam struck every facet. A column of light rose. Along the edges of the crystal grove, Anuphis felt strength bloom within her. The serpent traps and mirrored ghosts were behind her. Ahead lay the hall of crystals, where the first light of dawn would meet the radiance of tears. And in her heart she knew each new step was another line written into her initiation, another breath in the unveiling of the pyramid's final mystery. Anuphis stepped into the hall and was instantly pulled into a realm of infinite gravity. Granite stelae rose on either side, forming mirrored corridors where beams of torchlight pierced the dimness in hundreds of fiery threads. The air itself felt soaked with the cold glint of stone and lapis. The very act of breathing slowed, and her footsteps echoed faintly, like ancient messages bouncing between walls. The floor, carved from a single slab of marble, shone so flawlessly her boots made no sound. Light scattered across embedded lapis crystal, which flared like fragments of the night sky. She walked along a wide path marked by a thin silver thread, Ariadne's line in a world of illusions. On either side, pedestals of bluish granite bore the symbols of the elements. Earth, represented by a broken stone from which tiny sprouts emerged. Water, a basin of flowing liquid that shimmered with reflected flame. Air, a carved wingless figure that whispered when even the faintest breeze passed through it. Fire, a stone sculpture of frozen flame, motionless yet strangely alive. As Anuphis passed the gallery of the elements, she felt their ancient powers seeping into her. Earth lent her endurance, water, adaptability, air, clarity, and fire, inner passion. The mirrored panels caught and distorted her image. In one reflection, her robe shimmered silver, in another, gold, in a third, she wore armor, ready for battle. Each vision trembled slightly, as if alive, reminding her that illusion here could shape reality. Halfway through, she heard a whisper, soft as leaves stirring in a morning garden. It came not from the air, but from within the marble beneath her feet. She knelt and touched the cold surface. A subtle vibration pulsed beneath her palm, life bound in stone across generations. At the path's end stood a mirror, unlike any other, its vast surface cracked, fractures spreading in a pattern like veins. Behind the glass shimmered a fog, as though water hung in air. She gazed into it and saw not her own face, but that of her mentor, whose eyes glowed with calm authority. "You seek truth," the reflection said, silently, but truth is not in mirrors. Her mentor's face dissolved, replaced by another shard, her mother, holding a folded scroll of sacred texts. Anuphis inhaled deeply and pressed her palm to the cracks. "Let the mirror open," she whispered, "if I am meant to know myself." The glass trembled. Torchlight shattered into a wild flurry of stars. The stone beneath her feet rippled like molten lava. The air thickened with the scent of incense and wormwood, and the cold marble warmed with the breath of hidden spirits. All the reflections scattered, and a passage appeared, formed by two stellae drawn together like wings. A golden light broke through the seam, soft and warm, like sunrise over the Nile. Her heart racing, Anuphis stepped forward. For the first time in ages, her steps made a sound, soft sand whispering beneath her boots, carried by a wind from the pyramid's hidden core. The passage led to a circular chamber. Granite walls were inlaid with spirals, stars, and sacred circles. At its center stood a sarcophagus of pale basalt, veined with lapis lazuli. It was ancient and eternal at once. Its lid bore the image of open hands reaching toward the sky, and it emitted a faint glow. She approached and studied the carvings, 5 epochs, first light, youth, maturity, aging, and dusk, etched with perfect precision. Between them scenes, a Nile sunset, a child's first step on sand, sorrow and triumph. Kneeling, she pressed her palm to the lid. The stone responded with a faint tremble. Silence filled the room. Then whispers, deep and layered like echoes of 1,000 voices. The heart of reflections opens to those who do not fear their own face. Enufis lifted her head as a soft column of light rose from beneath the lid. It illuminated her features, and in it she saw her journey, not as a quest for external truth, but for the fire within. The glow spread across the chamber. The granite walls warmed. As the light faded, the sarcophagus opened. Inside, a mirror, framed in the pattern of time, cracked by memory. In it, her reflection shimmered calm, clear, and full of resolve. She smiled and touched the glass. A ray passed through her, an invitation. The sarcophagus closed silently behind her. Darkness returned, but not absolute. A gentle inner radiance filled the room. She rose, knowing now that her path was forever linked to reflections, that within this mirror she had glimpsed her truest self, the heart of the pyramid, held within. When the final light passed through the mirror, Enufis felt a quiet peace bloom in her chest. It was as though rain had washed away years of doubt, and the dust of centuries had become a stream of truth. The floor beneath her feet grew warm, like the first rays of dawn through ancient stone. She stepped back, but her gaze was caught by the gleam in the mirror's depth. The fractures resembled ancient runes. She touched one with her finger. The old glass pulsed. She thought she heard water, an echo of silver tears, a reminder of where she had been. Her eyes turned to the sarcophagus lid. The carved epochs glowed faintly, first light and dusk shining softly, each with its own sound, whispers of wind, drip of water, distant dog barks, and the laughter of children on Nile shores. Enufis understood, pyramids do not conceal death. They hold the music of life, carved into stone. She walked around the sarcophagus, listening to her steps on marble, each step a note in an invisible melody. The torches had dimmed, but the chamber did not go dark. Warm light now flowed from the reliefs themselves, as if the stone had learned to shine. "I see your heart, pyramid," Enufis whispered, her voice steady and distant. The mirror responded with a golden shimmer. Behind her, the wall answered with a quiet echo, as though the pyramid had accepted her words. Every sound, even her breath, became part of a monumental chorus of stone voices. Then the lid of the sarcophagus lit up, carved fingers reaching from marble, inviting her to touch the depths. Enufis lowered herself gently, her hands resting on the stone. Warmth wrapped her palms. Beneath the lid, something stirred, a flutter, like the beat of a small heart. She gathered a handful of inner light, tracing the patterns. The depth of the sarcophagus seemed endless. Every touch opened a new door, a memory, her first steps in the corridor, the serpent mosaics, the transparent stelae. Soft light filled the corners of the hall. In the floor, she spotted faint lenses, tiny insets of weeping crystal that rose just above the surface. She leaned in. Through one, she saw herself as a child, reaching toward the temple's threshold, unaware that it would change her forever. A tear slid down her cheek. It held gratitude and peace. The inner mirror had reflected her memories, now alive in every shard, every crystal. She stood and approached the carved columns that ringed the chamber. Made of black granite, they bore figures of linen-clad priestesses reaching skyward. Between them ran chains of symbols, like constellations. She laid a palm on one. The carvings shimmered, symbols sparked to life. The ceiling cracked open, and a spiral of light burst down, striking the sarcophagus. "This is your calling," a voice echoed from every mirror at once. She smiled and answered, "Let your light burn within me forever." The beam pierced her chest. Enufis felt herself become part of the pyramid. Each cell of her body now pulsed with ancient energy, woven into her blood, filling her with strength and certainty. The secrets of thousands of years had joined her name. When the last shimmer faded, the sarcophagus closed beneath a spiritual seal. The mirror's cracks healed. The crystal lenses dimmed. Only one path remained, paved with glowing lapis runes. The runes formed a trail to the port of time, where past and future melt into one. Anufis stepped forward, leaving behind the heart of reflections, and understood the serpents, mosaics, mirrors, and grains were all verses in her own living scripture. And she was ready to write its final chapter. For the first time, Anufis felt the pyramid itself pause, as if holding its breath, when she crossed the threshold marked by the lapis runes. The corridor, paved with golden quartz, greeted her with a heat that pulsed from every shard of stone. The torchlight, mounted in copper sconces, pierced the veins of quartz and scattered into 1,000 brilliant fragments. The air grew thick and viscous, like molten glass, yet the gray marble beneath her feet emanated a coolness that grounded her, fire above, ice below. And she walked between them like a flame through the twilight. Step by step, attuned to her own heartbeat, Anufis walked the marble path. Her footsteps made no sound, yet each one resonated with a subtle pulse, as though the pyramid itself marked her progress. Tiny hollows between the slabs were filled with golden dust, glimmering like stars fallen from the heavens. She scooped some into her palm, cold, soft particles, like desert wind that had found its way underground. The walls around her shimmered with raised quartz patterns, evoking ancient groves of papyrus. She ran her fingers over them. Dust embedded in the lines gave rise to melodies, the hush of morning breeze, the echo of swelling sands, the distant toll of sanctified bells. She leaned into the stone, immersed in a sea of pulsating memory. The corridor soon narrowed into an arrow-like tunnel. The ceiling sloped low, the walls pressed closer. Above her, constellations had been carved into the arch. Torches set at shoulder height traced luminous orbits through the space, casting light like celestial beacons. Each breath she took passed through invisible fractures in the stone, issuing a whisper, like the pyramid breathing in its sleep. The climb was steady and solemn, each step carved to perfection, its edge inlaid with gold. Anufis felt the heat of the metal beneath her feet, each rise a silent prayer to endure what lay ahead. At the summit, a circular chamber opened before her. The walls, made from pure white granite laced with lapis, were etched with diagrams, solar disks, lunar phases, comets in flight. Torchlight shimmered off the inlays, forming an illusion of stars within a stone-born sky. At the center stood the clock of eternity, a towering construct of obsidian, marble, and lapis. Twice her height, its body carved from a single monolith of glassy black stone. Within its frame shimmered fine fractures, ice-like veins of time. Lapis hands, thin and radiant blue, moved along its edge. Between the discs lay a spiral of golden sand, endlessly flowing into itself. Around the obsidian surface, mosaic bands of black basalt and gold encrypted 6 cycles, the golden age, dreams of sand, the age of doubt, the cry of time, shadows of the past, and the dawn of eternity. Along the bottom edge, runes preserved the names of ancient keepers, their carved faces still gazing at her with solemn resolve. Anufis stepped closer. She felt the pulse of the spiral echo in her veins. As her hand rose, the inner lapis hand glowed faintly. A hum rose from the clock, deep and organ-like, saturating the chamber's every crevice. The hand stopped at one epoch, the Golden Age. "Apellium," said a voice from within the obsidian. "Are you ready to take the flow into your hands?" Startled, Anufis breathed life into the spiral. The voice echoed from every fracture. She nodded. "I have come to witness the truth." She touched the lapis hand and guided it to the mark of dreams of sand. A wave of power surged through the clock. The spiral ignited, light blooming in the obsidian cracks like dawn's dew. The sand rose, a vortex of glowing grains mirrored in the marble and disc facets. Within it flickered scenes, merchant ships laden with spices and cloth, Nile festivals, glowing lanterns on riverside pylons, the first writings of priestesses capturing dawn's voice. Her chest filled with warmth, but she forced herself to turn the hand again, to the age of doubt. The spiral surged again, and a chorus of whispers emerged, echoes of elder councils debating omens and stars. In the dark mirror, a veiled woman's face emerged, lit from within. In her gaze, Enophis saw her own fears, then turned away, guiding the hand to the cry of time. Shadows roared from the spiral, and the hall echoed with the sound of footsteps, thousands marching, wheels clashing, rain striking stone. Epoch by epoch, she turned the hand, shadows of the past, stone-bound moans of fallen spirits. The dawn of eternity, a gentle glimmer, a life reborn beneath celestial warmth. At last, as the hand aligned with the dawn, the clock sang a mighty chord. Golden sand and lapis gleams united, rising into a radiant dome overhead. The room's walls lit anew, and marble below became a mirror of stars. Amid the spiral, a small lapis cube emerged, the heart of the flow, compressed into form. Kneeling, she lifted it. The cold stone trembled in her palm, sending silver pulses through her veins. The dome opened. Before her stood the time portal, an obsidian ring encircled by translucent quartz, where quicksilver trickled in frozen loops. Holding the cube forward, Anubis felt space vibrate. Time spirals converged, creating a maelstrom pulling her into a world where past, present, and future collapsed into one. She stepped through. Blinding light enveloped her. Visions raced past, temples, drifting sand, spinning flurries of time, flashes of ancient fire. Each one vanished before the next appeared, yet all stitched together in a single breath of knowing. When the storm passed, Anufis stood at a threshold, the place where it all began. The sands, lapis columns, mirrored stelae had been left behind. Before her stretched a corridor leading to the pyramid's very core, where time would become water, and water become light. Her gaze fixed ahead, and a quiet certainty blossomed in her chest. The portal of time did not lead outward, but inward, into the uncharted depths of her soul. As Anubis stepped across the threshold of the Hall of the Star Sphere, she was enveloped by a silence so profound it echoed like the void. The walls, arches, and semi-dome ceiling were carved from noble obsidian, absorbing all light and returning it as a dim, shifting shimmer. Every step she took on the mirror, like obsidian floor, rang out softly beneath the vault, where constellations etched in stone were scattered in 1,000 points, lapis lazuli and mica inlays glowing with a cold brilliance. The dome of the star sphere loomed above her, like a sleepless sky stretching into eternity. At its center was a vast circular recess, filled with a gently shimmering glassy crystal, the eye of the heavens. Inside it pulsed with sonic vibrations, a distant hum, like the whisper of galaxies, a soft chime reminiscent of water trickling through desert oases. The vault was adorned with the 36 primary constellations of the ancient Egyptian heavens. Each star's essence was captured in mosaic, obsidian, lapis, gilded metal, and translucent mica. Some stars glowed with violet calcite light, others shimmered with mercury dust, tiny solar hearts sealed in stone. Anufis stood still in the hall's center, her gaze gliding over the glinting surface. She saw hunting scenes carved in relief along the arches, Wet trampling enemies, Ptah raising the stars, Thoth pointing his scepter toward the afterlife. The details were so fine that only up close could one see the symbols woven into the star maps. Along the walls stood ancient instruments of observation, bronze and lapis astrolabes. Their rings were etched with meridians marking the paths of the sun, moon, and planets. They soared across granite grooves like peacocks, spreading feathers across the night sky. In one niche, Anufis found a round stone table etched with a stellar movement chart. Arranged on its surface were golden-coated palmwood figurines of astrologer priests who once charted the heavens. Beside them rested a scroll case of ivory, adorned with a carved zodiac. She unrolled the scroll. The ink had darkened with age, but the drawings were sharp, a solar eclipse predicted to the minute, Venus's transit across the sun, a prophecy of the coming age of the rooster and Leptis Magna. Each line lured her deeper into ancient wisdom. "The time has come to listen," she whispered. The dome responded like a cosmic bell. From the center of the eye of the heavens rose a pale beam of blue light that traced the dome, reflecting off each star and releasing faint waves of resonance. From within these waves came a voice, soft but distinct. You stand beneath the eyes of the universe, daughter of Re. Seek the key to the celestial disk. Anupis raised her hand. Resting on her palm was a miniature astrolabe, the same from the table, but small as an amulet. Its lapis needle pointed directly to the eye. "Show me the path," she said, and under her touch the lapis engravings began to tremble. At once the floor beneath her vibrated, and the obsidian wall panels began to turn, revealing hidden corridors between the celestial cartographies. The hall divided into 3 sections, each aligned with a motion, rising, culmination, and setting of the star disk. She entered the section of rising, walking upon lapis glyphs shaped like a rising sun. The walls displayed morning skies, Sohar-Ra's first rays touching palm crowns, priests greeting the dawn with praise. In one relief, she recognized her ancestors in prayer, her lineage immortalized here. In the culmination section, 2 immense murals depicted Persian apogee. One showed the sun at zenith, the other a crescent moon racing over a balance of planets. The air grew denser, and Anupis's breath deepened, as if bracing for revelation. The setting section was dark blue like a starless sky. Lapis threads wove a net of meridians, connecting celestial nodes into a web showing the slow descent of light beyond the horizon. She saw silhouettes of men and women bearing incense vessels, symbols of the void where light retreats to be reborn. Returning to the center, the beam from the eye connected with the needle of her amulet, casting rays toward the dome. Reflections shimmered, revealing signs, a stellar code and glimmering dots and lines to be deciphered. Anupis held up the amulet and began reading. Each configuration of points and threads vibrated the stone. She heard distant bells, as though stars themselves answered. The first row of symbols described lunar alchemy, how to fuse starlight with the power of water. The second told of dawn's force, when sun and stars merge, granting clarity. The third held the rite of dusk, letting go of fear with the fading light. "I understand," Anupis whispered. "The stars teach me to walk through darkness and seek the light within." Again the eye answered with a low chime, releasing a golden rain of mineral sparks. Each one entered the amulet, charging it with the power of guardian stars. The astral rain lit every wall panel. The constellations blazed brighter, as if achieving their final form. Obsidian, lapis, and gold flared together, filling the dome with dawn-like brilliance. Anupis closed her eyes, letting the light fill every crack of her being. She felt herself as stardust and a single grain of sand on the desert wind. The star sphere's power became her breath. When the light dimmed, she opened her eyes and saw the time guide in a shadow near one column. "You have passed the star sphere, Anupis," he said. "The heavens have spoken. But only one who unites starlight with earthly flame will find the path to true immortality." She bowed her head. "I am ready." The guide stepped aside, revealing a narrow passage downward. Its walls bore 2 contrasting motifs, constellations in obsidian on one side, golden quartz on the other, earth and sky entwined. Anupis entered the corridor, where sand once more crunched beneath her feet, brought by the wind of time. She knew the hall of the star sphere had given her the key, but one step remained, to walk beyond time and become a bearer of light. As Anupis crossed the threshold of the Temple of the Moon Mirror, the air wrapped around her with the chill of majestic silence. Walls of black obsidian reflected faint silver glimmers, seeping through narrow windows above. Across the dust-veiled stone, ancient ritual patterns stretched, silver lines flowing like lunar phases, from the slivered crescent of new moon to the full circle at zenith. Beneath her feet, tiles of lunar marble glowed with a soft, matte sheen, each bordered by intricate designs of gold and tin. A subtle coolness radiated from the stone, as if the slabs themselves breathed the night's cold. Walking across them was like gliding over mirror-smooth trails across a dark lake beneath a starlit sky. At the heart of the hall stood the moon mirror, a massive obsidian disc framed by a delicate crescent moon carved downward. Its rim was inlaid with silver filigree and lapis lazuli that seemed to bloom from the surrounding shadow. The surface was gently clouded, like water under a full moon, with ghost-like shapes flickering just out of reach. A gentle mist trickled down the walls, gathering at the mirror's base in a pale, glowing halo. Encircling the hall, 6 basalt columns stood shrouded in a veil of dark frost, remnants of desert dew. Their capitals bore carvings of nocturnal creatures, owls, nighthawks, and wind riders. Their wings clung tightly to their sides, and their eyes, set with silvery mica, flashed with the faintest breath of air. In a wall niche, a round altar of clear quartz rested. Its surface was etched with lunar phases and star charts. Lit by silver torches, several vessels lay upon it, glass flasks tinted pale blue, white ceramic containers embossed with droplets, and a silver mist catcher, an elegant, fragile vessel for collecting nocturnal dew, veiling chomai fake case. As Anaphis approached, a delicate fragrance of angelica and sweet tobacco rose, a scent that didn't just fill her nostrils, but threaded itself through the fibers of her consciousness. Her fingers slid along the altar's etched lines, and at her touch, silver dust stirred across the tiles with a whisper. Like the pyramid itself was rousing from its ancient slumber. The moon mirror moaned softly, an echo of breath. Its surface rippled, and through the haze an image shimmered, at first fleeting silhouettes in a dance, then a slow silver river, and in its depths a face. Not hers, but another priestess, ageless and unseen, eyes brimming with knowing. Anaphis closed her eyes and took a deep breath. A sensation of weightlessness flooded her, as though every atom of her body dissolved into the temple's delicate energy. She remembered her mentor's words, "The moon mirror does not show the future, it reflects your inner light and leaves only the shadow of fear for you to overcome." Opening her eyes, she turned to the mirror without fear, letting the silver images envelop her. She circled the chamber, picked up a half-empty vessel by the altar, and filled it with dew collected in the mist catcher. The drops slipped over her fingers like the moon itself weeping, leaving behind the world's tears. Slowly, she dripped the water onto the mirror's surface, where each drop sharpened the images, the lines around the contact points cracking like glass etched with light. The mirror flared with light. Silver rings parted, revealing a subterranean lake surrounded by columns. Mist drifted above the water, and distant chimes rang like stone bells, calling her into a new rite. Her palms clung to the warm obsidian. Ripples unfurled from her touch, and ancient lunar sigils emerged, slender patterns etched by moonlit fae. Each mark pulsed with life, resonating with her heartbeat. The spell-like glow expanded, filling the chamber, lapis rings flared, and the mica stars above drew in the scattered light. She lifted a full bowl of dew above her head, offering it to the moon mirror. Each falling drop burst and flowed into silver trails on the obsidian. In these rivers, reflections were born, visions of a future not yet lived, a dance in moonlight, a judgment over ancient time demons, a meeting with an unknown ally beneath a starless sky. Dew settled upon her hair and shoulders, forming a delicate frost, the sign of initiation. A gentle glow stirred within her, the first sprout of power tied to the night's mystic ebb. When the final drop fell, the mirror exhaled, its surface became clear as water. It revealed not a reflection, but a passage of light leading into the temple's hidden heart. Stepping into the portal, Anaphis entered a tunnel lined with shimmering obsidian, silver frost clinging to its walls. Underfoot, the sand whispered softly, blended with traces of lunar crystal. The tunnel sloped downward, her steps chiming like bells in the quiet of night. Light shimmered on the tunnel's floor until, ahead, the walls widened into a circular chamber where a pedestal held the moon crystal. It pulsed gently, releasing a solemn chime of long silent bells. She approached, placed the dew-filled bowl on the pedestal's edge, and touched the crystal. In that instant, cold light rippled outward, and the entire temple was filled with the quiet song of water, pulsing from within the stone. A silver moon engraved on the crystal split opened to reveal an inner flame, a mingling of cold light and warm water, her strength and path, now forever bound to the rhythm of the night sky. The tunnel trembled. Walls began to close, pouring lunar sand across the passage. Knowing the rite was complete, Anaphis raised the moon crystal, now glowing brighter than ever. Obsidian dust on her robe sparkled, and her heart beat with feather-light serenity. She turned toward the temple's exit, knowing the moon mirror had reflected not only her fears, but also the power hidden in every phase of the celestial light. Now, with the tunnel before her, she carried in her hand a fragment of the night itself, a key to the next trial, where starlight must unite with the force of the moon. When Anupis stepped through the threshold of the time portal, she entered a warm twilight where a hidden garden breathed beneath the stone. The walls were carved from gray granite laced with veins of malachite, forming tangled patterns like creeping vines. These mineral tendrils rose in arches overhead, intertwining like the roots of ancient trees that had grown into the heart of the pyramid. The air carried the scent of damp soil and moss, as if the mountain itself were alive and breathing. The floor was dusted with a fine layer of earth, strewn with decaying leaves, fingerprints of time mingled with the memory of the past. Between the slabs of stone, tiny shoots had broken through, the forgotten remnants of seeds nourished by secret underground springs. And Nufis lowered her gaze and saw how the delicate grass beneath her feet bent softly in rhythm with her steps. At the center of the hall lay a circular basin carved into a monolithic stone. The water within was clear, but its bottom glittered with small opals, tears of memory, each one containing a shard of history. When a single gem brushed the surface, it rang with a sound like a tiny bell, sending ripples across the still pool. Around the basin grew the vines of remembrance, bands of slender granite stems, from which hung small amulets crafted from soft metals. These were offerings left by former priestesses to honor the earth and preserve the sacred names and moments. Each charm bore an inscription, names etched into curves like threads of eternity. Anufis walked a narrow path engraved in the stone, her every movement seemingly reviving the melody of bird song. Behind her, the vines bowed gently, and from their twisting arms, droplets of moisture fell, nectar of memory, absorbed into the soil, as if the earth were drinking the past anew. Beside one of the columns stood a pedestal with a vessel of matte labradorite. Inside was the elixir of memory, a blend of aspen water, sage decoction, and crushed crystal of weeping stone. When Anupis lifted the vessel, a chill slid across her skin, leaving a delicate tremble. She bent to sip it, and the taste was sharp, earthy, like a draught drawn from the roots of time. Then the spirit of the earth entered the garden. His form was translucent, a towering figure hewn from living stone, with malachite eyes and a crown of glittering opals. He leaned toward Anufis and, extending one hand, touched the trunk of a granite vine. The tendril rustled, releasing a column of golden dust, and the air filled with a sound like the hush of the steppe wind. The roots beneath her feet quivered, and the earth groaned, as if to welcome its daughter home. The spirit spoke without voice. His message passed directly into her mind. She felt the memory of every stone, every drop of water, every buried seed flowing into her veins. A soft echo moved through the garden, a reply from the spirits. Granite waves ran along the walls, composing a symphony of remembrance. Anufis closed her eyes and saw visions, the moment a river was born, falling into a warm lagoon, the morning steps of shepherd boys across dew-drenched meadows, the hands of priests laying down wheat as an offering to the earth goddess. Each image unfolded before her like threads in a sacred tapestry. Opening her eyes, she stepped toward the basin. Gently, she lifted a tear of memory from the water and pressed it to her chest. The stone shimmered, and a cool spark flared inside her. Within the opal danced a vision, a manuscript, ancient and fragile, listing the names of those whose lives were forever bound to this place. Anufis continued along the path, deeper into the garden, toward the far wall. There, hidden in moss and fern, were the wisps of memory, tiny feathers from the birds of Bennu, woven into the roots. She plucked one and slipped it into the vessel of elixir. The liquid glowed with a soft silver gleam, and within it rang a low chime, like bells echoing at dawn. She approached a marble altar, upon which rested a crystal key embedded in a hollow slab of granite. Though colorless, the crystal pulsed with malachite threads of light. Placing the vessel and the feather on the altar, she watched the granite illuminate in green. Roots of stone emerged, delicate as tendrils, curling around the offering and leading her gaze toward a distant niche in the wall. There, a hollow had been carved into solid rock, the heart of memory. Within lay an ancient mirror, made of smoky quartz. Its surface was webbed with cracks, and in those fissures sparkled the dust of the earth. Anufis raised the vessel, the elixir rustling like silver rain. Slowly she poured it into the mirror's basin. The fluid spread across the quartz, igniting each droplet into glowing runes, ancient glyphs of remembrance. The mirror came alive, the dust within whirled like a storm of a hidden world, and the surface turned smooth, like the glassy calm of a sacred lake. Reflections appeared, moments frozen in time, sandstorms born of wind, oases blooming green in the midst of desolation. The builders of pyramids lifting granite blocks with hands made strong by faith. Every image pulsed with the heartbeat of the living earth. She placed her hand on the mirror's surface. Its chill drew warmth from her skin, and a faint vibration ran through her fingers. Then, from within the mirror, her own figure emerged, surrounded by vines of granite, rooted in the soil, embraced by earth. Behind her, the ground stirred and whispered in an ancient tongue. Earth is the mother of all, the keeper of lives. To those who honor her memory, she grants the roots of eternity. The voice left no sound, only a resonance that clung deep in her soul. She stepped back as the mirror cracked again, and the silver elixir bled across its fractured glass like starlight. Suddenly the ground groaned, and the vines crept toward her feet with damp green tendrils. The granite walls trembled, and the garden of eternal memory filled with music, the chiming of opals rising in a whirlwind. Emboldened by the power of elixir and mirror, Anubis lifted the crystal from the altar and placed it within her amulet. The moon crystal and the memory stone glowed as one, silver and emerald light weaving together in her hand. When the stillness returned, the garden exhaled. Dewdrops slipped from leaves, and the earth grew quiet once more. At the entrance, the spirit of the earth awaited her once again. "The earth has received your memory," he said without words. "You are her daughter now. Go on and remember, memory is your anchor." She bowed silently and walked toward the portal beneath the lapis runes, where the granite pathways resumed. Beneath her feet, the sand whispered. And the vines, like a forest in the pyramid's heart, bent softly before her step. And Nufis emerged from the garden of eternal memory into a vast hall where the air lingered between the towering columns of the Temple of the Sunset Song. Carved from red granite, the hall shimmered with hues ranging from warm copper to deep ruby. The low sun's rays filtered through narrow windows beneath the dome, casting golden highlights on the carved bas reliefs, making them come alive with gleaming reflections. The majestic columns were adorned with circular alcoves, where sacred instruments rested, kettle drums, harps, flutes, and the cries of small gongs. Each was carved from a solid block of second-generation stone, inlaid with ivory and olivine. Beneath Anubis' feet stretched a floor of polished quartz tiles, each one seemingly enclosing a swirl of sunset, ripples of orange, rose, and violet. The thin channels between the stones were filled with molten gold, forming musical staves. If one listened closely, the faint whisper of ancient songs could be heard, the rustle of bell chimes blending with the elusive tones of lutes. The temple walls were adorned with bas reliefs recounting the great rituals of twilight. One depicted a priestess raising a golden horn to the sky, from which light poured like the nectar of a grapevine. Another showed a circle of singing women, whose voices, legend said, wove invisible threads between the living and the sun descending beyond the horizon. The features of the figures were carved with exquisite detail, delicate contours of lips parted in song, and eyes gazing toward where sky meets earth. At the back of the temple beneath the dome stood a colossal stone organ, 3 tiers of harp like basalt resonators, each wave shaped like the radiance of the setting sun. Between the ribs of angelic resonance stretched strings spun from pure feline hair, strung between falcon beak pegs of gold. The organ was part of a grand system. Low notes traveled in a spiral up the columns, forming a sphere of sound. Anufis approached the edge of the dome, where a pedestal held the vessel of the sunset priest. Hewn from red marble and etched with the sun's path, dawn, zenith, and dusk, the vessel contained the water of sunset rain, droplets that had absorbed the final rays of light and offered themselves to the earth in song. Bowing her head, Anubis touched the vessel with her forehead, feeling her breath slow and her heartbeat in harmony with the gentle gongs of the temple. Above the altar, the dome descended in a spiral adorned with frescoes painted by an astrologer artist on a dark canvas, where swirls of copper and pink stone formed a galaxy spiraling toward the center, where a priest sat on a throne of bright obsidian, holding a solar disk that radiated soft golden light. The frescoes were animated with minuscule sapphire inlays, thousands of points glimmering in the temple's twilight. When she looked up, the dome echoed with a faint chime. The organ's first chord resounded, slipping through the labyrinth of pillars. The sound rolled in waves, first soft and barely audible, then swelling in strength, intertwining with the echo of drums carved in niches. Every beat on a potter's wheel drum resonated like the earth's own heartbeat. Anufis closed her eyes, letting the sound wash through her. The organ's delicate vibrations mingled with the marble's chill underfoot and the warmth of the golden inlays. In that music was both farewell and promise. Each sunset closed the day, yet declared a new hope. From the dome's apex, a beam of sunlight descended, carefully aligned through a lattice of apertures. It struck the central altar, illuminating the vessel, where the waters of sunset sparkled with opaline gleams. The light stirred the water into motion, spinning it into hues from deep purple to molten amber. As the beam shifted along the temple's axis, the organ's rhythm transformed into a mysterious melody of low strings. Lapis lazuli dots in the bas reliefs caught the red light, and the stone-carved priestesses seemed to stir. Marble lips whispered a distant song, and granite eyes glowed with symbols of gratitude. Anufis stepped toward the central altar, trailing her fingers along the vessel's edge. Her touch left glowing impressions on the ancient stone. She plunged her hands into the water. The cold embraced her skin, sparking a shiver. Each fingertip felt the flow of liquid mercury, a symbol of transformation at sunset. As she withdrew her hands, a silver crescent had appeared on her skin, traced by the sediment's fine grains. Was it coincidence or a sign of a great rite? The organ's tones deepened, echoing like a sunset wind. Then the temple's pediment groaned. An enormous panel with ornate carvings slowly descended, revealing a hidden alcove. Inside lay a scroll upon brocade, embroidered with golden threads. Anufis trembled as she unrolled it and recognized the opening verses of the ancient sunset hymn, a song whose words were keys to the unity of time and sound. The first verse described the golden pulse of dusk, the moment when the sun's final rays refracted through the dome, forming ripples on the temple's waters. The next spoke of the phantom echo, the lingering resonance that follows the organ's last note. The final stanza foretold the return of the teacher, when harmony between the organ and temple water would summon a guardian spirit to reveal secrets of eternal light. Anufis held the scroll aloft, letting the sunlight play across its golden threads. The chill of night melted into the warm weight of dusk in her hands. She understood she must recreate the hymn, awakening each instrument to summon the ancient spirit. Without haste, the priestess stood before the great organ. Her fingers danced along the feline strings, sending the first chords soaring, ringing with copper overtones. She then ascended to the kettle drums and, striking them with ivory mallets, added a deep rhythm. From all corners joined the sounds of suspended gongs and ceramic flasks, a precious chorus rising to become the song of sunset. When the final note faded, a gentle resonance filled the hall. The stone bas-reliefs quivered, and from their forms stepped figures, men and women robed in the glow of twilight, crowned with poppies, their faces lit with the colors of the dying sun. The second verse of the hymn stirred in her soul, and the sunlight once more lit the vessel. Tears of dusk shimmered in deeper hues. The opals in the basin changed their cry to a pure tone, echoing from walls to dome. Then, from the altar's axis, he appeared, the spirit of sunset. His form blazed in streams of light, a figure cloaked in red granite, crowned with lapis and opals. In his hands he held spheres of semi-translucent flax, within which pulsed the sky's final light. Anufis froze, awed by his radiant presence. The spirit bowed his head, and the organ's music harmonized with his voice. Your song is complete, child of Ra. Let the music of sunset guide your path into the light. With that, he dissolved into the fading beam, and silence returned to the temple. Only the soft echoes remained, and the slow rhythm of falling opals. Anufis ascended to the temple's roof, where the warm breath of sunset faded into the cool of oncoming shadow. She knew then, the sound of sunset had awakened the ancient spirit, and her journey to the pyramid's heart now glowed with new light. The darkness of the chamber Anufis entered after the Temple of the Sunset Song was not mere absence of light. It was a dense, viscous presence, as if the pyramid itself wished to conceal all its secrets here. The walls, clad in black obsidian, reflected no gleam. The air was like a vacuum, her breath echoed within her chest, and every subtle shift of her robe against her skin sent ripples through her senses. The floor was covered in a thick layer of silver sand, brought from the Hall of Mirrors and condensed here into a soft, rippling carpet. The grains shimmered faintly with her first step, sliding beneath her boots, brushing one another with a sound like 1,000 falling moonlit drops. At the center stood a wide, round basin carved directly into the stone. The water inside glimmered with liquid silver, as if the moon's own light had collected here. Each ripple reflected the dome above, a circular aperture through which a star-drenched sky was visible, enclosed by a crystalline dome set into the obsidian. Above the basin rose a sculpted rim of white marble, engraved with silhouettes of shadows, figures of men and women entwined in a dance of light and darkness. Each retained facial and bodily features, yet they were blurred and flickering, like memories glimpsed through weathered glass. As Anufis approached, the water stirred, her own shadow rose from the depths, surfacing before her. It stood in stark contrast, a dark figure without features, yet clad in garments that perfectly mirrored her own, down to the folds of her robe. The shadow bowed its head, and from the basin came a low sigh, as if it gathered every unspoken fear. The walls trembled faintly, silver lines raced across the obsidian, sketching out a labyrinth of shadows. A chill ghosted over her shoulders, like darkness itself was trying to touch her. She stepped back, and the sand beneath her heels formed small dunes. A chime from the bell at her waist rang softly through the air, summoning the strength of her inner light. This trial was not to destroy her shadow, but to accept it among the sands of memory. But first, she must undergo the challenge, a duel within the labyrinth of silvered shadows. From the basin, a column of light ascended, framing an entrance into a sealed circle. The basin walls shifted open, revealing a maze of low marble walls adorned with lunar carvings. The sand released a faint mist, neither warm nor cold, but unsettlingly neutral. Anufis entered the labyrinth. From her first step, the darkness deepened. The maze was built of mirrored walls coated in silver dust, and they reflected not her image, but her shadow. Around every turn, the dark figure waited, matching her stride. A step forward, her shadow stepped. A side step, and the figure mirrored her, its shape distorting, broadening. Slivers of light, tiny beams embedded in the maze's spines, barely touched the path, leaving behind a pulsing glow. Each step lit a new stretch of floor, while a blurred shadow hovered at the periphery, ready to displace her from the marble. At the second turn, the maze narrowed. On a strip of light, Anufis had to turn sideways, allowing her shadow to pass. But it didn't. Instead, it stood face to face with her, clicking, a sound like obsidian dripping onto stone. The silver dust within the mirror stirred, and from it rose images of her past, her mentor, her sister, her mother, those who had once taught her to embrace both light and dark. Each flickered through the dimness, a reminder that her shadow was a collection of fears and doubts etched into silver sand. The maze groaned. Walls shifted, reshaping corridors anew. Anufis steadied her rhythm, breathing deep. She tried to feel the pulse of time within the sand and stepped forward. The grains flared with light. There, in that radiance, her shadow faltered. Drawing near, she moved with the cadence of unseen drums and swept her hand as if brushing away mist. The shadow froze. The labyrinth mirrors rang softly like fractured bells. A few paces more, the path opened into a chamber. At its center stood a pedestal of onyx, atop which lay the crystal of shadows, a gleaming orb of cold phosphorescence. It was bound in an iron casing adorned with runes that cast dark shapes across the sand. Anufis approached. Her shadow followed, standing beside her like an equal. In the basin's reflection, she saw leaves fall into water, sending ripples outward. The priestess closed her eyes and brushed the sand in front of the crystal, gathering the finest grains, the sands of life. Each sparkled faintly at her touch. She sprinkled them onto the crystal, and its glow deepened. A low hum rose as the grains clung to the surface, fusing their memories into its shadow. The crystal trembled, and her shadow placed a hand upon her shoulder. It was cold, but not hostile. She turned toward it and saw its eyes gleam with gentle light. The shadow stepped forward. Marble priestess statues along the walls stirred, their carved lips whispering, "Embrace your fear." The obsidian trembled, and the labyrinth began to dissolve, revealing the path back to the silver basin. Anufis drew an obsidian dagger, its blade slender, its handle inlaid with lapis lazuli. Clutching it tightly, she passed the edge over her shadow, not cutting, but touching its sand like skin. A pale scar shimmered, and at its heart bloomed a silver gleam. The shadow stepped back in reverence. The labyrinth receded and she walked free. Her boots kissed the obsidian floor once more, soothed by its coolness. Returning to the basin, she watched as the shadow melted into the water, leaving behind luminous rings. The opals on the basin floor quivered, sending waves like the petals of a silver flower. From the depths rose a soft melody, and bubbles burst gently at the surface. Anufis lowered the dagger into the pool. The mirrored surface rippled, and her reflection wavered in the silver. But now she recognized it. Her shadow was a part of her, cold and obscure, but hers. Drawing strength, she looked up to the dome, where the opening had widened, letting in pale lunar light. It touched the silver sands, and glowing runes lit the walls with lapis lazuli radiance. One who embraces darkness shall find the light within. Then the organ's echo returned, no longer a test, but a blessing. Anufis left the hall of the silver shadow with new strength, carrying the power she had earned in the labyrinths of her own soul. Anufis stepped away from the temple of the sunset song and entered a long corridor where each step echoed with the voices of ancient times. The walls, built from black basalt and obsidian, shimmered faintly in the flicker of torchlight, as if the pyramid itself breathed memories. On either side stretched niches of various shapes, narrow arches, angular windows, circular medallions, each carved into the stone by artisans of old. Resting in these hollows were fragments of forgotten epochs, ceramic shards bearing smooth red and black designs, scorched bones etched with runes, fossilized papyrus leaves, and semi-transparent crystals shimmering in hues of emerald and amber. Traces of incense still smoldered in tiny trays before the niches, releasing a thin veil of aroma, a blend of woody bitterness, the sweet note of myrrh, and the warm, resinous breath of frankincense. Anufis listened. The silence was so dense that every rustle of her robe sounded like a whisper from the wind, carrying forgotten secrets. In the first alcoves were ceramic fragments depicting water scenes, boats drifting along the morning Nile, a fisherman pulling in his net at the water's edge, or children splashing at the riverbank. Anufis ran her finger along a shard, cool and rough, like the surface of an ancient temple. The touch brought forth sounds of water, the gentle ripple of a stream, the brush of stones, the creak of oars, a flash of life, the genesis of cults centered on the great river. The next alcoves held remnants of papyrus scrolls inscribed with hieroglyphs. They were translucent, like dried petals. As she touched one, Anufis heard a rustle of words, like thousands of feathers stirring in darkness, fragments of chronicles on pyramid construction, the lives of priests and commoners, and harvest festivals. Images formed in her mind, hammers striking granite, the hum of quarry workers, the steps of those who carried stone blocks. One corridor held the remnants of battle, human bones, skulls, fractured ribs, petrified fingers. Each artifact bore markings carved posthumously, symbols of warriors and protective runes. Touching a skull, Anufis was flooded with visions of battle, the call of war horns, the clash of steel, the thunder of hooves, the moans of the wounded. Fear, despair, and heroism intertwined in a reverberating echo that filled her chest. Suddenly, the corridor widened into a horseshoe-shaped gallery. At its center stood a fragment of the Sands of Life basin, a glass vial segment resting on a pedestal. The sand within cascaded slowly, forming tiny hills. As she approached, a dampness grew underfoot, as if mist rose from the pyramid's depths, bearing scents of resin and ancient dust. In one corner sat a miniature obsidian model of the pyramid, its facade marked with fine lines of lazurite, tracing corridors, ridges, and chambers. Upon closer inspection, Enophis noticed some lines converging at unknown points, a clue to hidden paths. The lazurite trembled gently, responding to her presence. The gallery seamlessly returned to the corridor, now lined with stone-carved frescoes. One panel depicted the judgment of Osiris, scales weighing a heart against Maat's feather, surrounded by gods in solemn deliberation. So vivid were the carvings that one could almost hear them, the rustle of sacred robes, Osiris' voice delivering judgment. Enophis paused, closed her eyes, and envisioned the moment of truth. Would her heart be light as the feather or heavy as stone? Farther down stood statuettes of priests and warriors, crafted from bronze and blood-washed blade. These figurines retained not just form but motion. At the slightest shift in air, one could sense footsteps, the heat of coming battle. Enophis touched a statuette of a warrior king in armor. A tremor ran through her fingers, as if bearing the weight of his sword. The corridor ceiling gradually descended. Walls became smoother, as though polished by the winds of time. Mica mirrors embedded in the stone allowed beams of light from adjacent chambers to pierce through. In the reflections, Enophis suddenly saw not just herself, but scenes from her own life interwoven into history. A child stepping into the pyramid for the first time. An acolyte learning chants and rhythms of light, a rune shadow seeker passing through the rites of moon and earth. Her reflection flickered and then darkness. At the corridor's end stood a niche with the cube of memory, a seemingly unremarkable dolomite sarcophagus engraved with the rings of time. Each line etched a distinct era. The lid had shifted slightly, revealing a narrow gap. Enophis ran her hand over the surface, cold and slick. The crack emitted a moan like an ancient cliff. She scraped a bit of dust from within. Inside lay soil mixed with ash and opals. That pinch was like a core of memory, a drop of a civilization now silent. Breathing it in, Enophis heard a quiet hymn, songs to old gods, sung by priests at the dawn of the world. Replacing the lid, she stepped aside and heard the scrape of stone. One niche had shifted. A hidden door opened in a bas relief. Beyond it was a descending staircase lit by soft red light. The sand in the alcoves began to churn, as if the corridor itself resisted letting her go. But the priestess now knew memory was her guiding star. With quiet resolve, she took the hidden path, leaving behind the corridor where every breath echoed with voices of the past, and descended toward the altar of unity, where the four elements would converge into one whole. Enophis stepped slowly through the archway that separated the corridor of memories from the sacred space of the Temple of Unity. Before her opened a vast hall, as if the earth itself had exhaled in relief. The four elements had gathered here to tell their ancient tales. The walls, made from alternating layers of dark granite, pale marble, transparent quartz, and obsidian, resembled an enormous book, each page a world locked in stone. Beneath her feet, the priestess felt the contrast of the tiles. The earthen granite was warm and coarse, like soil freshly tilled for planting, the moon silver. Marble cold and smooth, like the face of the night, the quartz cool and velvety, like the touch of the first rain, and the obsidian hard and mirror like one, as if it contained the void itself. The stones were laid in a spiral, leading to the center, marked by lazurite inlays that indicated the flow of elemental energy. The walls rose into arches and niches, where sacred vessels rested in granite cradles. The bowl of earth, carved from solid malachite, was filled with damp, loamy soil that exuded the scent of freshly turned fields. The vessel of waters, formed from transparent crystal, held spring water with tiny silver crystal fish that shimmered in its tranquil depths. The cube of wind, sculpted from marble etched with swirling reliefs, cradled feathers of nocturnal owls suspended in still motion, and the sphere of fire, forged of obsidian threaded with lava veins, pulsed with a hidden ember, warm to the touch like the breath of a slumbering volcano. Enophis approached the bowl of earth. She dipped her hand and sank her fingers into the soft mixture. The soil was moist, reaching to her ankles, and she felt its pulsing life, minute roots pushing upward, reminiscent of forgotten forests buried beneath the pyramid. With every movement beneath her fingers came a faint ringing, as if the roots struck stone and summoned a living response. Next she leaned toward the vessel of waters. Its crystal surface was cool and smooth. Anupis bent down and brushed her lips across the water's surface. A shiver coursed through her body. The water sang in her ears, a quiet melody of ancient rivers flowing through the ages. In its reflection, she saw waves, the mirrored sky, and her own face surrounded by shimmering light fins. The next element was the cube of wind. Anufis withdrew a wand of woven reed from her cloak and touched its tip to the cube. The feathers stirred softly, and from the temple's arches came the hunting call of winds, a sound like a dozen birds of prey slicing through air. The feathers rose into gentle turbulence, then returned to their niches, leaving behind wisps of cool breath. Finally, Anufis touched the sphere of fire. The obsidian was hot, almost pulsing, as if a tiny sun burned within. Her touch stirred a rhythmic thrum and a sharp cracking sound, like a diamond being cleaved. The sphere glowed from within, radiating waves of heat and releasing the scent of burning coals and sacred resins. Having completed the circle of initiation, Anufis moved toward the center of the hall, where the great altar of unity rose, a multi-tiered structure integrating the bowl, vessel, cube, and sphere into a single composition. The base of the altar was shrouded in earth from which tiny shoots rose, dotted with dewdrops. The middle tier formed a broad pool, where water from the vessel of waters cascaded in and out in gentle waves. Above the watery belt floated a ring of great feathers, suspended mid-air to form a still whirlwind. And above all loomed the sphere of fire, upheld by 4 golden columns, symbols of primeval energy. Anufis raised her arms and cried aloud, "Unity of the elements, I summon you." Her voice echoed through the hall, and was answered in every niche. The earth trembled, the water surged, the wind rose, and the fire pulsed brighter. Fallen leaves flared with sparks, and the air was filled with a gentle radiance. Then the cycle began to reverse. Fire dimmed, wind quieted, water stilled into glassy calm, and earth settled into serenity. Each element faded without vanishing, blending into harmony. The altar filled with a delicate chime, a response of the elements to the priestess's call. From the apex of the dome, a single strand of light descended, falling precisely into the center of the bowl. The strand was white as the core of time, and as it touched the water's surface, a column of light rose upward, connecting with the spheres above. The beam passed through water, wind, earth, and fire, linking them in a unified stream. In this stream, Anufis felt a clarity kindling within. The elements had become her allies and guides. She understood that her journey was no longer merely a trial, but a calling to lead these forces to the heart of the pyramid, where their energy would awaken the final transformation. As the light faded, the altar of unity returned to stillness. But the granite tiles remained warm, the water in the bowl gently murmured, the feathers rested like soft petals, and the fire sphere still glowed faintly, reserving its residual power. Anufis lowered her arms and bowed to the altar. The stone floor, dimmed by arching shadows, hummed softly like a revelation. High in the dome, a mosaic labyrinth shimmered with runes, linking the 4 elemental circles into a single grand emblem, the symbol of unity. With this sign, an open window appeared before her, a portal to the hidden chambers of the pyramid where the throne of Khufu awaited. The path to culmination drew near, and the priestess stepped forward with firm resolve, leaving behind the altar of unity, yet carrying within her the strength of all the elements. Anufis emerged from the hidden corridor and entered a vast hall where every granite slab echoed with the weight of centuries. The walls, constructed of massive blocks of black and blue lapis lazuli, shimmered with the flicker of newly lit torches. The flames danced across the ribbed surfaces, revealing faint outlines of ancient reliefs, plowed fields, ruined cities, processions of priests. At the heart of the hall stood the massive throne of Khufu, carved from a single slab of pale marble, emanating an aura of calm and majesty, as though the pyramid itself had gathered around it to guard its spirit. A thin film of light streamed across the marble floor, gliding beneath Anufis' feet as she approached the throne. Each step resounded with a muted echo, swirling through the air like an invitation for the final silence to depart. In that silence, Anufis heard a soft whisper, not a voice, but the vibration of fissures in the stone, an energy awakened by her presence. She moved deliberately, her gestures imbued with reverence and the noble assurance earned through every chapter of her journey. Before the throne lay a circular obsidian and lapis mosaic, an emblem of cosmic order. At its center shimmered the crystal, the heart of the pyramid. Modest in size, it filled the chamber with an indescribable glow, the mingling of ocean and sky, of sunset sands and dawn dew. The crystal emitted gentle rays that wove together in a luminous web, reflecting every trial she had overcome. The priestess paused 1/2 meter from the mosaic, her chest filled with a quiet tremor. Her fingers slowly brushed the surface of the crystal, cold and warmth mingled beneath her touch, the meeting of two epochs. At that instant, the marble beneath the throne groaned, the granite walls shuddered, and the sacred temple organ roared to life. The first chord rolled out in waves, echoing the crackle of the mosaic, the ring of ancient bells, and the rustle of sacred sands. The hall resounded with elemental music, the deep bass of dripping water, the resonance of wind strings, the crackle of fire, and the whisper of earth. These sounds merged into a singular, elusive harmony, the breath of the pyramid itself, rising from the crystal at its core. Anufis closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, allowing that breath to penetrate every layer of her awareness. As the music faded, the crystal blazed with sudden brilliance, triggering a burst of inner light. The marble panels behind the throne parted, revealing a narrow passage descending into the pyramid's depths. Anufis stepped forward, feeling the granite stairs tremble beneath her feet, as if she were descending into the heart of the world. The steps led to a chamber where the vaulted ceiling was adorned with refracted beams of light, mirrored hundreds of times in small prisms. A soft twilight reigned here, and every crystal facet and fleck of obsidian shone like a beacon. The walls depicted scenes from the grand flow of time, the birth of stars, rituals of lost civilizations, and prophetic visions of a future no less mysterious. Humans merged with machines, the Nile flowing beneath glass domes. Anufis saw herself etched into one fresco, standing before the throne of Khufu. In another she appeared aged, passing a key to a new priestess. Past and future, now and eternity, all converged. Calm and clear, she descended further, recognizing each scene not as spectacle but as part of her soul. At the base of the stairs lay the final corridor, a narrow tunnel with a floor, made of mirror shards joined by threads of lapis. In those mirrors, Anufis saw not herself, but the collected memories of all who had stood here. She stepped carefully, so as not to tear the flowing fabric of memory. Each of her footprints left a luminous trail, lighting the way for those to come. Emerging from the tunnel, she found herself in a grand chamber, the very heart of the pyramid. The walls were inlaid with lapis, obsidian, quartz, and malachite, each material pulsing with energy. At the center stood a round basin filled with pristine water that reflected 1,000 refracted rays. Suspended above it was a delicate crystal sphere, the mirror of the cosmos, showing the reflection of all existence. Anufis approached the basin and knelt, touching the cool water. Her face was mirrored in the crystal sphere, and she understood she was now connected to every drop in that pool, to every stone, to every melody of the temple organ, and to every rhythm of the mosaic. Rising, she uttered the final incantation in the ancient tongue of the pyramid's priests. In response, the mirror of the cosmos flared with brilliant light, and the water turned dazzling white, like the very first light of being. At that moment, a vortex rose from the basin, water surged upward, surrounding Anufis in a radiant veil, and thousands of droplets formed a dome of light above her. Beams pierced the water, scattering into lapis and quartz prisms, creating bursts of rainbow. Anufis felt each element, earth, water, air, fire, darkness, and light, rise to empower her. As the vortex subsided, the water grew clear again, but deep within pulsed a crystal, shining in silver, copper, lapis, and gold. It was the true heart of the pyramid, not one crystal, but 5 echoes of every trial, filled with infinite light. Anufis touched the water, and the crystal rose to the surface, dividing its strength between the pyramid's spirit and her own soul. she knew the awakening was complete. The pyramid, dormant for centuries, had stirred, its corridors glowed, the temple flared with bursts of light, and a pale dawn broke above its crown. Anuphis smiled, her mission was fulfilled. She would now become the bearer of this light, carrying it into a world where sand and lapis, water and fire, shadow and light would merge into a single stream of life. Turning, she saw the crystal slowly sink back into the water, leaving behind ripples that spread across the floor to the farthest walls. These waves chimed gently, like distant bells from the Temple of Songs, echoing through every stone. Anuphis stepped toward the exit of Khufu's sanctum, knowing that behind her lay no longer darkness but the light she now bore, and the light that bore her. At the surface she paused in the doorway, where the Nile's sand greeted her with the cool whisper of its waves. A soft breeze carried the scent of incense and fallen leaves, and the sunrise painted the sky in pink and gold. Anuphis exhaled, gathering the final strands of her new symphony. Her past had become legend, and the future was forming in every gleam across the lapis waters of eternity. With that, the daughter of the pyramid stepped into the new day, toward a path yet unwritten, yet already alive in the luminous channel that now bound her heart to the heart of Khufu.